This video is part of the Director Project, a monthly playlist of videos from creators all over YouTube devoted to exploring the work of a singular filmmaker. This month we are exploring the filmography of Night Shyamalan, so make sure to check out all of the other videos on this playlist, and if you have a video that you want to include, just tweet it at CultPopture on Twitter. Now, without further ado, on to the show. This is an ode to Night Shyamalan, a man once hailed as the next Steven Spielberg, a man whose name is synonymous with twist endings. After a meteoric rise in the 90s and early 2000s, Shyamalan's star began to fade when he released a series of flops, starting with The Village and ending with After Earth. Two of these flops, The Last Airbender and The Happening, are considered amongst some of the worst movies ever made. But then, the comeback story. Funding his next film by borrowing $5 million against his own home, Shyamalan created his first hit in a decade with The Visit, following that up with his smash hit, Split. However, Split's much-anticipated sequel, Glass, spoiled this comeback story just a little bit by receiving much more mixed reviews. Shyamalan's career is one of huge highs and incredibly low lows. A career that has had just as many triumphs as it's had failures. And for that reason, as a filmmaker, Shyamalan is actually one of my greatest inspirations. Because he is not a filmmaker with a perfect, flawless track record. Instead, he's a filmmaker who has failed time and time again, and yet keeps trying and keeps swinging for the fences. We, the audience, tend to focus on the success stories. The Kubricks, the Spielbergs, and the Scorseses, those who seem to be born geniuses and spin nothing but pure gold. But the honest truth is that such prodigies are rarities, and even the filmmakers we put on godlike pedestals have their screw-ups from time to time. The truth is, despite what every book on screenwriting would have you believe, there is no formula for how to make a great movie. Filmmaking is an art and not a science. Therefore, in Shyamalan, I find a filmmaker who I can identify with, one I can look up to. His career is far more relatable than that of wunderkinds like Nolan or Tarantino. He's someone who has had just as many failures as he's had successes, and yet he keeps making art. And that, in a way, is far more admirable than those who just have perfect track records and crank out nothing but hits. You see, it is so incredibly hard to see the flaws in your own work. Your brain is programmed to see everything that it comes up with as a brilliant idea, and it is incredibly hard to sort through what ideas are pure gold and what ideas are honestly drivel. It's kind of like trying to follow a roadmap that's been taped to your face. You're just too close to it to have any perspective. And the greatest filmmakers make it seem way too easy. But Shyamalan's career is a rare one where we can actually see this struggle play out in his filmography. We can see his effort to create something great, and we can see how all too often it goes wrong instead of right. With a filmography that has so many stone-cold classics, but also so many terrible movies, Shyamalan's career destroys our binary way of thinking about all filmmakers being either good filmmakers or bad filmmakers. In his films, we can see how thin of a line there is between what makes some of his movies great and what makes others terrible. His style of direction is one that balances on the razor edge of stylistic and self-indulgent, of sincere and corny, and for that, I really admire the guy. Where other filmmakers would have a flop and retreat to something familiar, Shyamalan instead has taken bigger and bigger risks. After a disappointment like The Village, one might have expected him to make a film like The Sixth Sense again. But no, instead he created a bizarre fairy tale based on a story that he told his kids at bedtime. Then when that failed, he made a hard R&B movie about plants killing people. And then when that failed, he tackled a big budget fantasy for children. And so on and so forth. Every time this man falls short of expectations, he gets back up, dusts himself off, and goes right back to work, taking bigger and bigger risks. And this is why I love M. Night Shyamalan. He's a risk taker. This man has never once played it safe in his entire career. I don't think he has the ability to. Every one of his movies is just strange, packed with odd acting choices, weird camera angles, and strange story decisions. We take it for granted now, but the twist ending at the end of The Sixth Sense was a huge gamble. The main character was dead the whole time? That could have felt like a really cheap gimmick that invalidates the rest of the story. But it was executed so well that it's the first twist most people think of when they think of big twists in movies. Or what about when he made a thriller that was secretly a superhero movie way before superhero movies were this hugely popular thing? Or the fact that his sequel to said superhero movie takes place almost entirely within an insane asylum. That is a risk that a lot of people feel didn't pay off. In fact, this man's career is littered with risks that didn't pay off. He puts himself out there again and again, making films that are completely uncompromised and unmistakably his vision. This man does not have a fear of failure. And in an age of homogenized blockbusters, this is incredibly refreshing. So in that spirit, here's some risks of Shyamalan's that I find incredibly inspiring. Again, the twist in The Sixth Sense. It could have come across as a cheap gotcha moment, but instead it set the standard for what twists could be in cinema. Next, let's talk about Unbreakable's incredibly unique cinematography. The film is lit so incredibly dim you almost can't see what's on frame half the time. And honestly, it makes the film dreary at points. There's incredibly interesting and odd angles throughout the film, like this shot peeking in between the seat cushions on the train, or this entire scene shot in the mirror, which is just fantastic. This film is filled to the brim with incredibly interesting decisions that I definitely prefer over most superhero movies' dull and safe shooting style nowadays. I love the fact that we never really get to see the alien in Signs. When we finally do get to see it, it's still kind of shrouded in darkness, out of focus. When it is in focus, it's only brief glimpses. It's sometimes frustrating, but it also adds to the mysteriousness and eeriness of the film and makes it a lot more creepy than a lot of alien movies. I actually think the twist at the end of The Village is a really great concept, just maybe not executed perfectly. I also really like the designs of these monster things. Lady in the Water might not be great, but I love that a filmmaker known for horror thrillers pivoted and made a bizarre bedtime story. The Last Airbender was not a success by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it's pretty dang awful, but I really do admire his attempt. Making a movie this big, much less in Pennsylvania, is incredibly difficult, and I admire anyone who takes it on. I actually think that After Earth is like this close to being a really great movie. The concept of a young man trying to master his fear in a horrible post-apocalyptic Earth could have been really compelling. I feel Shyamalan's decision to make the theme of the film about eliminating motion instead of gaining courage is really where he messed up here, especially in the incredibly emotionless direction of both Will and Jaden Smith. But there was some really good stuff in this movie that I feel could have been great. I've actually thought about doing a film fix on it, but I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. So comment below and let me know if that's something you'd like to see. After those flops, Shyamalan lost the faith of Hollywood. So he borrows $5 million against his own home and makes the weirdest found footage movie ever made. A horror movie about grandparents that is just so utterly bizarre and yet weirdly works. It's a film that straddles the incredibly thin line between the unsettling and the silly. In fact, he said he had to re-edit it 3 separate times. The first time the cut was way too artsy, the second time it was way too comedic, and then he finally got it right on the third when he made it into more of a thriller comedy. And good thing he did, because this movie was a huge success and saved both his house and his career. Good job. Then you have Split, yet another movie that borders on goofy and yet somehow works. I think this is largely due to James McAvoy's amazing performance and the incredibly brilliant decision to, hire him. He really brings all of the bizarre personalities that Night came up with to life and made some of the more weird ones work in a way that I don't think they would have if he hadn't been cast in the film. And of course, making it a sequel to Unbreakable was pretty dang smart. Which leads us to Glass, a movie that didn't work for a lot of people, but actually kind of worked for me. Again, I think it's incredibly interesting they decided to set this superhero movie in an insane asylum where the characters actually begin to question whether or not they actually have abilities. And I actually really like the twist at the end. I just think it wasn't perfectly executed. With a few minor tweaks, I think it could have been really compelling. And I hate that kind of ruined the movie for a lot of people because I think there's a lot of other amazing facets to it. Like Glass's plan to break out of the asylum, which I thought was genuinely genuinely brilliant. Again, I've thought about doing a film fix about this, but I don't know if anyone would be interested, so comment below if that's something you'd like to see. Also, Shyamalan continues to experiment with camera angles with this really interesting one. He ultimately overuses it, but I really like that he's still experimenting. And all of this just scratches the surface of the incredibly brilliant, sometimes weird, sometimes deeply flawed creative decisions that Shyamalan has made in his career. And I hope what I'm getting at here is coming across clearly, that we shouldn't just admire artists who are perfect, but also the ones who try and sometimes fail. That when an artist takes a big swing and the swing just doesn't quite connect, we should still admire that they took the swing in the first place. And that as a filmmaker, M. Night Shyamalan has never backed down from a big swing. And that's led to many misses, but when he connects, he knocks it out of the park. He has a new film coming out later this year entitled Old. It might be as good as The Sixth Sense. It might be as terrible as The Happening. I have no idea. But regardless, I cannot wait to see it. Because I love watching those big swings. Because I admire M. Night Shyamalan. Hey folks, thanks for watching. The algorithm apparently doesn't think that 50,000 subscribers means that people want to watch my videos and only shares my videos with new people if people like and comment a lot. If you would leave me a few, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, feel free to subscribe and ring that bell if you want to see more, and feel free to share my videos on sites like Reddit or Twitter if you want to help get the word out. And as always, thanks for watching.